I'm going to start on a somewhat unusual note because I want to compliment my lead adversary here, Senator Landrieu, who has fought so hard to bring this bill to the floor. She is passionate about getting this done, and it's because of her efforts that we are here. And I have to say that I am just as passionate as she in opposition to this bill. Many of us come from coal states or oil states or natural gas states. Rhode Island doesn't have coal. At least it hasn't in generations. We used to mine coal in Portsmouth and Cumberland, but it's been a long time. We don't have natural gas sources. We don't pump oil. What we do have is a coastline. And at that coastline, what coal and oil and natural gas are doing to all of us through the operation of natural laws, through the operation of laws of science, stuff we can't get around, this isn't opinion, is really harmful to Rhode Island. Naval Station Newport has a tide gauge. My friend Senator Manchin was kind enough to come and visit from West Virginia, and we started out bright and early in the morning, and our first stop was with the Navy folks down at the tide gauge. And at the tide gauge, what they show is that since the 1930s, the water levels are up 10 inches. We had something very big happen in Rhode Island in the 1930s. We had the hurricane of 1938. If anybody wants to take 2 minutes and Google hurricane of 1938 and hit images, you will see terrific destruction. You will see our capital city flooded to the top of the buses. You will see houses smashed to flinders and boats thrown up onto the land. That was with a sea 10 inches below what we have now. And every responsible scientist tells us the risk of worse and bigger ocean storms has increased because of the emission of carbons. So I have a very clear perspective on this, and that is that we really have to address our carbon pollution problem before it comes home to roost in really dangerous ways in my state. It's already there already. As the senator from West Virginia saw, we got fishermen who say, this was not my grandfather's ocean. Their world has changed because of the way we have changed it. This pipeline, because of the filthiness of the fuel that it brings into the market, will add additional carbon dioxide in the amount of nearly 6 million cars per year on the roads. 6 million cars per year on the roads. And that comes home to roost in Rhode Island. That comes home to roost in warming waters. Narragansett Bay is nearly 4 degrees mean winter water temperature warmer than it was 50 years ago. I can remember driving over the Newport Bridge and the Jamestown Bridge and looking down in the winter and seeing trawlers out at work. Trawlers fishing for the winter flounder. Well, the winter flounder is gone. It had more than a 90% crash, largely because, as the scientists have told me, the warmer Narragansett Bay is no longer hospitable to the fish. 4 degrees doesn't seem like a big deal to me, probably doesn't seem like a big deal to any human for whom the water is kind of an alien place. But for the fish that live in it, 4 degrees is an ecosystem shift. My wife's major professor at the University of Rhode Island Graduate School of Oceanography explained that to me several decades ago for the first time. The argument is that this is going to bring jobs. I'm all for those jobs. But let's not be selective about when we're for jobs. If we're only for jobs when it's oil pipelines, then something else is going on than concern about jobs. Where was the concern about jobs when a bipartisan piece of legislation called Shaheen-Portman for energy efficiency was here on the floor and was estimated to create not 42,000 temporary jobs, not less than 4,000 direct temporary jobs, not less than 50 permanent jobs, but 190,000 jobs. That bill got nowhere. It died here, and it died here for reasons that were very open in the front of the paper. Jeanne Shaheen's opponent, who was a former colleague of ours, asked to have the bill die so that she would not have a legislative accomplishment to her credit. And so the agreement that the bill was going to pass got reworked, and the folks came back to Majority Leader Reid and said, well, actually, we're not ready to support this bill. We need a vote on Keystone Pipeline. We need a sense of the Senate on Keystone Pipeline. And so Leader Reid said, okay, we can have a sense of the Senate on Keystone Pipeline. Agreed. And then they came back again, moved the goalposts again, and said, well, we need more than a sense of the Senate now. We actually need a hard vote on the Keystone Pipeline. And Leader Reid checked around and said, all right, I don't like this much, but sure, fine. In order to move Shaheen Portman, a 190,000 job bill, go ahead and have your vote. Then they came back and moved the goalposts a third time. They said, we don't just need a vote on the Keystone Pipeline, we need to win the vote. And if you can't give us a win on the vote, then you don't get Shaheen Portman. Well, when the goalposts get moved that often, you can pretty much figure out that there's something more going on than the merits of the bill. They didn't want the bill to pass. They didn't want it to come up. But where was the concern then about 190,000 jobs when everybody's in an uproar about these 40,000 indirect temporary jobs? I will stop right now and do anything to get infrastructure legislation passed and put people to work rebuilding America's roads, rebuilding America's water pipes, rebuilding America's bridges. We can put hundreds of thousands of people to work doing that. But when we had the chance to do that, when Chairman Boxer brought a 6-year highway bill out of the Environment Public Works Committee, every $1 billion we invest in highway infrastructure supports 13,000 jobs. And this was a multi-billion dollar bill. Did they pass it? No. They filibustered it, stopped it, and gave us a 3 to 5 month stopgap bill during which nobody's going to enter into any big contracts, depressing employment, but moving the bill into the next Congress, where they thought that they'd have a majority, and in fact, they will. So if you want to do something about jobs, we can take your 42,000 dirty pipeline jobs, and we can raise that by a factor of 5 just by doing Shaheen Portman. We can raise it by a factor of 10 or 15 with infrastructure legislation. We can do big jobs, bills, and we're ready to do them, but not when it's only dirty oil pipelines, because there are two sides of the ledger. There's the side that says jobs, and there's the side that says harm. And my problem with this is that our friends on the other side of the aisle will not look at the second page. They pretend that the second page doesn't exist. Even in coastal states, where I've been down to Georgia, to Sapelo Island, where the University of Georgia has a terrific marine science undertaking that's gone on there for decades now. They're all clear. Carbon pollution is doing real harm to the shore, to the coast. It's raising the Georgia sea level at a rate that is challenging the ability of the famous marshes to keep up. And if they can't keep up, they flood. If they flood, they get washed away, and you lose that entire infrastructure that supports clammers and oysterers and fishermen and tourism and all the things that are so important to the way of life in Georgia. I say that because I see my friend Senator Isaacson here on the floor. But you could use an example from every single state in the country, and our colleagues will never, ever look at that other page. If you were the CFO of a corporation and you would only look at one side of the ledger, you go to jail for that. It shouldn't be asking too much to ask our colleagues to reflect on the fact that there are benefits to this pipeline and there are harms to this pipeline. And from my state's point of view, it's all harm. And from a net point of view, the harm hugely outweighs the value by, I think, virtually any state's measure. Perhaps not South Dakota. But there's real harm. that this will cause. 6 million cars equivalent of CO2 added every year is more than we need. So I think we need to turn the corner. More importantly, it's not what I think that matters. The American people understand that we now need to turn the corner on climate change and carbon pollution. Doesn't matter who you ask. You ask independent voters, it's better than 2 to 1. You ask all voters, it's about 2 to 1. You ask young voters, it's more like 4 to 1. There's a poll that shows that young Republican voters, self-identified Republican voters under the age of 35, when asked about a politician who denies that climate change is real, they say that that politician they were asked to check off the box. And what they checked off was ignorant, out of touch, or crazy. So it's time to make this turn. And there's no better moment to make this turn than on this pipeline that would bring the filthiest fuel on the planet into circulation and hurt those of us who are being hurt by carbon pollution already even more. I yield the floor.
Use up his 10 minutes.
I yield the floor.